Welcome to Timeless Stories. And today, I want to ask you something. What is the most powerful thing in the world? Is it money? Is it an army? Is it a bomb? No. Sometimes, the most powerful thing in the world is a poem, one poem, written by one lonely young man in a cold, dark room. A poem that made millions of people cry. A poem that made governments afraid. A poem that is still read today, decades after the man who wrote it is gone. Today, we tell the full story of Pablo Neruda. Not just the love poems, not just the famous words, but the real man behind them. His secrets, his pain, his choices, his end. Because Pablo Neruda was not just a poet. He was a diplomat, a politician, a lover, a father who failed his child, a man who stood with the poor and sometimes forgot the people closest to him. This is the full truth, the beautiful and the painful. And while you listen to this story, you will also improve your English. I speak slowly. I use simple words. I explain everything clearly. So, this is your English practice and your history lesson, all in one. And before we begin, write in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is in your country right now. Now, let's begin. The year was 1904. The place, a small town called Parral in the south of Chile. Chile is a long, thin country in South America. It rains a lot there. The forests are dark and green. The streets are quiet. The people are poor. On July 12th, 1904, a baby boy was born. His name was Neftali Ricardo Reyes Basoalto, a long name, a difficult name. Later, the world would know him by a different name, Pablo Neruda. But when he was born, he was just a small baby in a poor family. His mother, Rosa, was a school teacher. She was gentle and kind, but she was also sick, very sick. Only 2 months after Pablo was born, his mother died. 2 months. Pablo never knew her face. He never heard her voice. He only knew her from old photographs. A quiet woman with soft eyes. A woman who never got to hold her son for long. His father, José del Carmen, was a railway worker. He was strong, loud, and practical. He worked with his hands. He worked long hours. He did not understand poetry. He did not understand his son. José remarried. Pablo got a stepmother, a kind woman named Trinidad. She loved him. She gave him warmth. She gave him food. But the house was still cold in a different way. Pablo was a quiet child. He walked alone in the forests near his house. He listened to the rain on the roof. He watched birds. He touched leaves. He smelled the wet earth after storms. And he began to write. Not because he wanted to be famous. Not because someone told him to. But because words were the only way he could say what he felt inside. He was 13 years old when he wrote his first poem. His father found it. He threw it in the fire. "You will not waste your life on paper," his father said. But Pablo did not stop. He kept writing, secretly, at night, under candlelight, because the words would not stay inside. When Pablo was 16, his family moved to the city of Temuco. It was bigger. It had more people, more noise, more life. And it was here that Pablo met a woman who changed him forever. Her name was Gabriela Mistral. She was a schoolteacher. She was also a poet, and later she would win the Nobel Prize for Literature. Gabriela saw something in young Pablo. She gave him books, French poetry, Russian novels. She told him, read everything, feel everything, write everything. Pablo listened. He read night and day. He read until his eyes hurt. He discovered Victor Hugo. He discovered Rimbaud. He discovered Walt Whitman. And then, at the age of 19, he wrote a book of poems. The book was called 20 Poemas de Amor y una Canción Desesperada. In English, 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair. It was published in 1924, and it exploded. People across Latin America read it and cried. Young people read it out loud to each other. Old people said, "This is exactly what I felt, but could never say." One poem from that book is still one of the most famous love poems in history. It begins with these words, "Tonight I can write the saddest lines." Simple words, short sentences, but they carried the weight of the whole world. Pablo Neruda was 20 years old, and he was already a legend. But behind the beautiful words, there was a real life, a complicated, painful, and sometimes ugly real life. Fame came fast, but peace did not come with it. Pablo fell in love many times. His first serious love was a woman named Maria Antonietta Hagenaar. He met her in 1927 when he was sent to work as a diplomat in Asia. Yes, the famous poet was also a government official. Chile sent him to represent the country in places like Burma, India, and Sri Lanka. He was lonely in Asia, far from home, far from his language. So he married Maria Antonietta. They had a daughter together, a little girl named Malva Marina. But Malva Marina was born sick. She had hydrocephalus, a condition where fluid builds up inside the brain. She could not walk. She could not speak normally. She needed special care every day. Pablo could not handle it. He left. He left his wife. He left his sick daughter. He fell in love with another woman, a beautiful Argentine woman named Delia del Carril. He left his family behind and started a new life. His daughter, Malva Marina, died in 1943, alone in the Netherlands during the Second World War. She was just 8 years old. Pablo was not there. He never talked about her publicly. He almost never mentioned her name. This is the part of Pablo Neruda that his fans don't always want to see. The poet who wrote the most beautiful words about love abandoned his own sick child. It is painful to know, but it is true, and the truth, even when it hurts, is important. In 1936, something terrible happened far away from Chile. Spain erupted into civil war. The Spanish Republic, the democratic government, was attacked by General Francisco Franco and his fascist army. Pablo was the Chilean consul in Spain at the time. He watched the war with his own eyes. He saw cities bombed, He saw people killed in the streets. He saw children running from fire. And the words came. But this time they were not love poems. They were weapons. He wrote a collection called España en el Corazón, Spain in the Heart. These were poems of anger, of grief, of solidarity. He printed the books himself, even on the battlefield, with paper made from soldiers' uniforms and enemy flags. The poems were read in trenches, read by soldiers before they died. The words gave strength to people who had nothing left. Pablo Neruda became something new, not just a romantic poet, but a political voice, a voice for the poor, for the forgotten, for the suffering. He joined the Communist Party. For Pablo, communism was not just a political idea. It was a moral choice. He believed the world was unfair. He believed rich people stole from poor people. He believed that poets had a responsibility to speak for those who had no voice. Was he right? Was he wrong? The answer is not simple, but his commitment was real, and it made him many powerful enemies. In 1948, the political situation in Chile changed dramatically. The Chilean government turned against communists. President González Videla, a man Pablo had once supported, now declared that communism was illegal. Pablo stood up in the Chilean Senate and spoke against him. He gave a speech called Yo Acuso, I accuse. He named names. He listed crimes. He told the truth in public. The next day, the government issued a warrant for his arrest. Pablo Neruda, the most famous poet in Chile, was now a fugitive. He hid in friends' houses. He moved from city to city. People helped him. Strangers hid him in basements and back rooms. Because even people who had never read his poems knew his name. They knew he spoke for them. Then came the most dramatic moment of his life. In 1949, Pablo crossed the Andes Mountains on horseback. In the middle of winter, through snow and ice and freezing wind. For days he rode through one of the most dangerous places on earth. A group of loyal friends guided him. They moved at night. They slept in the cold. They barely spoke. And when Pablo finally crossed the border into Argentina, he was free. He was also completely alone in the world. No home, no country, no family, just his name and his words. He spent the next 3 years traveling in exile. He visited France, the Soviet Union, China, India, Mexico. Everywhere he went, people knew him. He gave readings. He wrote new poems. He met world leaders. Pablo Neruda had become an international symbol of poetry, of resistance, of hope. And then he fell in love one more time. Her name was Matilde Urrutia. She was a Chilean singer, passionate, strong, and deeply loyal. She became his third and final wife. For her, he wrote some of the most tender love poems in history. A collection called Los Versos del Capitán, the Captain's Verses. He published it anonymously at first, secretly, because he was still technically married to Delia. But when the truth came out, Matilde was the woman he chose, And for the first time in his life, Pablo Neruda had love and peace together. In 1952, Pablo was finally allowed to return to Chile. He came back to a hero's welcome. Thousands of people waited at the port. They cheered. They cried. They reached out to touch his hand. The poet had come home. He settled in his favorite house, a magical, strange, beautiful home on the coast. He called it La Negra, the Black House. Later, he built more homes. Each one was filled with colored glass, wooden ships, old maps, bottles, shells, and books. Pablo collected everything. He was obsessed with objects. A carved horse, a strange hat, a bottle shaped like a fish. He said objects had memories. They held the lives of the people who touched them. In his houses, he hosted parties. Writers came, artists came, musicians came. He cooked, he laughed, he read poems at the dinner table. He was generous and warm and funny, and he kept writing, poem after poem, book after book, about love, about Chile, about the ocean, about the stars, about poor miners digging copper from the earth, about fishermen pulling nets from cold water before sunrise. He was the voice of Chile, of Latin America, of the forgotten and the poor. In 1971, the world finally gave him its highest literary honor. Pablo Neruda won the Nobel Prize for Literature. The announcement said he won for a poetry that, with the action of an elemental force, brings alive a continent's destiny and dreams. He was 67 years old. He stood in Stockholm, Sweden, in the cold winter light, and he gave a speech that the world still reads today. He said, "I want the free man to exist, the man who creates, who loves, who speaks." It was the greatest moment of his life, but the greatest storm was just beginning. On September 11th, 1973, Chile woke up to the sound of bombs. General Augusto Pinochet, supported by the United States government, launched a military coup. He attacked the presidential palace. He overthrew the elected president, Salvador Allende. Allende, Pablo's friend, Pablo's hope, died that day. Chile fell into darkness. Pinochet's soldiers hunted communists, artists, musicians, professors, anyone who had spoken against them. Thousands were arrested. Thousands were tortured. Thousands simply disappeared. Pablo Neruda was in his house in Isla Negra when he heard the news. He was already sick. He had prostate cancer, diagnosed months earlier. His body was weak. His pain was constant. But the real blow was not the cancer. It was the death of his country. His home was searched by soldiers. They threw books on the floor. They broke glass. They knocked over his collections. A soldier said, "Is there anything dangerous here?" Pablo looked at his shelves full of books, and he answered quietly, "Yes, poetry is dangerous here." He was taken to a clinic in Santiago. He spoke to his wife by phone. He spoke to his lawyer. He tried to organize his papers, his books, his letters. He had so many poems still unfinished. On September 23rd, 1973, Just 12 days after the coup, Pablo Neruda died. He was 69 years old. The official cause of death was heart failure from cancer. But for decades, people whispered other questions. Was he murdered? Did someone inject him with something? In 2011, his body was exhumed, taken from the grave for examination. Scientists found traces of a dangerous bacteria in his body. The investigation is still ongoing. To this day, the full truth of how Pablo Neruda died is not completely known. His funeral was held in secret under the eyes of soldiers. Only a small group of friends could come. They carried his coffin through the streets of Santiago. And as they walked, something unexpected happened. People came out of their houses, quietly, carefully, afraid. But they came, and they began to sing. They sang the Internacional, the song of solidarity, of workers, of hope, softly at first, then louder. In a city controlled by soldiers, on a street watched by guns, people sang for a poet, because his words had lived inside them, and words cannot be arrested. Words cannot be shot. Words do not die. Pablo Neruda's houses still stand today. La Chascona in Santiago, La Sebastiana in Valparaíso, Isla Negra on the coast. All three are now museums. Millions of tourists visit them every year. They walk through the rooms where he lived. They see his collections, his ships, his glass, his maps. They feel the weight of a life fully lived. His poems are still published in over 35 languages. His books are still bestsellers in bookshops around the world. Young people still write his lines on walls, on letters, on their skin. I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. These words are not old. They are alive, every day, in every language. His Nobel Prize speech is taught in universities. His political poems are quoted by activists in every country. His love poems are read at weddings and funerals. And yet, the full Pablo Neruda was more than the beautiful words. He was a man who left his sick daughter. A man who changed wives like seasons. A man who supported political systems that also caused suffering. He was not a saint. He was not a villain. He was completely, painfully, brilliantly human. So what does the life of Pablo Neruda teach us? Here are 5 powerful lessons. 1. Words are the most powerful weapon. Pablo had no army, no money, no political power of his own. But his words made governments afraid. His words gave hope to the poorest people. Never underestimate what you say, what you write, what you speak. Words change the world. 2. Beauty and pain live in the same house. Pablo wrote the most beautiful love poems in history, and he also caused deep pain to the people closest to him. He was not one or the other. He was both. We must look at people and ourselves with honest eyes. The beautiful and the painful are always together. 3. Art is resistance. When soldiers searched his home, Pablo said poetry was dangerous. He was right. Art speaks truth when everything else goes quiet. Music, painting, poetry, stories, they are not decoration. They are survival. They are resistance. They are how we stay human. 4. Exile does not silence the voice. Pablo was forced to leave his country. He had nothing, no home, no passport, but he kept writing. He kept speaking. He kept creating. Wherever you are, whatever you lose, your voice cannot be taken. 5. A full life includes failure. Pablo Neruda was not a perfect father, not a perfect husband. He made choices that hurt people who loved him. But he also gave the world something that will never disappear. A life is not good or bad in total. It is a collection of moments, some brilliant, some painful, and all of them real. Pablo Neruda was born in the rain, a boy without a mother, a boy whose words were thrown in the fire. And yet, he became the most read poet in the Spanish language. He crossed mountains on horseback to survive. He built homes filled with color and light. He loved deeply, even imperfectly. He spoke for the poor when silence was safer. And when his country fell into darkness, he carried its pain into his final breath. His grave at Isla Negra faces the ocean. Because that is what he asked for. He wanted to hear the waves forever. And maybe, on a quiet night, when the wind comes in from the sea, the ocean still carries his words back to us. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. I loved her, and sometimes she loved me too. Rest now, Pablo. The words are still alive. Now I have a question for you, and I really want to know your answer. Pablo Neruda left his sick daughter to follow a new love. He abandoned her, and he almost never spoke of her again. But he also gave the world poetry that still heals millions of people today. So here is my question for you. Can a person be a great artist and still be a bad father? Can we love someone's work and still be honest about their failures? Write your answer in the comments below. There is no right or wrong answer. I just want to know what you think.